Everybody, George Harrison.
Thanks a lot. Hello. Thanks.
George,
It's so formal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. George, welcome.
Thanks.
You've said in the past that you're somewhat kind of little taken with the music today that it lacks, the lyrics are the same, I should say, the lyrics are the same, the chords are the same, but the spirit is not there from earlier years. There's a lot of toning going on. When you were getting ready to do Cloud 9, what have you set out not to do so that you would get away from that?
Yeah, well, I set out not to use drum computers and MIDI keyboards for a start, because I think most of the things these days are like that. With sequencers, you hear so many records, it's just one guy pressing one note on a whole bunch of things that are all sequenced. So I wanted to get it more human, like the late 60s or early 70s, how I used to make records in the past, basically. And just have it a bit more real.
George, how did you and Jeff Lynne meet and get involved with your project?
Yeah, I thought that he'd make a good producer for me. And this guy called Dave Edmonds, who was a neighbor of mine, he'd worked with Jeff, and so I asked him if he ever saw Jeff to tell him I'd like to meet him. That was back in about 1985. So then he came over, had dinner with me, and we just kept in touch, and by end of 86, I said, well, I'm going to make a record in January, do you want to do it?
Were you familiar with his work?
Oh yeah, that's why I wanted to call him up and meet him. I thought he'd be perfect for me, which he was.
George, I had a dream last night that you and everybody on that record decided to go and do a tour. My dream's going to come true?
Possibly. I think Elton at the moment's doing an album, and he's going to be promoting that because he said there was some story that Eric and him was going on tour, Eric Clapton, and Eric told me that he asked Elton, and Elton said, "Oh, I haven't heard about that." So the managers sometimes just make up these ideas. He said I couldn't do anything till next year anyway. But I think that kind of show would be nice. It'd be nice for me because I don't fancy being like the star of some show. I wouldn't mind being a part of a show and doing some of my tunes, but I wouldn't like the responsibility being out there on my own.
When was the last time you did any sort of major tour?
1974.
Well, it's time then.
Yeah, I think it's creeping up. I think with the end of this year or early next year, if I'm going to do anything at all, I better do it pretty soon. Otherwise I'll be, on crutches or something.
We are waiting.
Thanks a lot.
George, you talked in the past about the fact that you weren't that crazy about doing a video. And my mind set on you. I just love that video. I think it's so hilarious. And first I wondered how much of your own sense of humor was actually a part of that. And secondly, do you feel a little better now about possibly doing it again in the future?
Yeah. Well, you mean the video where I do the backflip?
Yes.
Well, my humor is such that I have to just be able to have something funny happening around me, and I can be deadpan because I'm not really into acting, but I think that way it works good. And basically it was the director, a guy called Gary Weiss, who incidentally directed The Ruttles. So he's a very funny fella himself, and it was, just through talking with him, trying to think of the idea, and he thought of just having a simple setting on that room and make the room move where I could just sing straight, play straight, and everything else would be the joke. And the other part of the question was?
Do more videos, or are you less?
Yeah, well now it's the sort of thing they expect you to do, they want you to do, and I didn't like the idea at first, but it's okay. So far they've seemed to work out okay.
What gave you the idea to do When We Were Sad?
You mean the song or the video?
The song.
Well, basically, it was, I just suddenly thought it'd be nice to write a song and record with the sounds of 67, 68, that period. It was just a whim, really. I just thought, well, that'd be nice, and especially because I was, at that time, with Jeff Lynne, I was in Australia. And I know how much he likes the old cellos and stuff. So So I started out to write it. I didn't have any lyrics at the time, so it wasn't really called When We Were Fab, but it was tentatively called Aussie Fab because it, it was reminiscent of the Fabs and written in Australia. So purely a nostalgia, trip down memory lane, really.
No deep message here.
No, not really. Excuse me.
I read where Just for Today came to being after you read a pamphlet on Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a kind of a different way of getting a song.
Yeah.
What triggers you to put pen to paper?
Well, really, if you're into the songwriting mood, then really anything can trigger it. Like, I had these 3 friends of mine who were all in AA at my house one night, and that's back in 1983. And this guy showed me the brochure, just a little paper thing that was called Just for Today. And it just seemed so nice, the nice idea to try to live through this day only. I mean, it's not just for alcoholism. I think it's good for everybody to remember, we can only live today. The only thing that really exists is now. Past is gone, and future we don't really know about. So it's like that extension of the be here now idea. And I thought it'd make a nice song, and so I wrote it. But it's good also for AA, I think. Maybe we could make it into a TV commercial.
George, at one time you considered calling your album Fab, and then you changed it to Cloud 9. Why did you pass on Fab, and why did you get Cloud 9?
Well, because Fab it's a little, if you know about the connotations of the past, of the 60s and the Fab Four and all those things and the pre-Fab Four, then it's a good little joke. But if you don't know about that, it sounds a bit pretentious. And also, when I looked at the photograph on the album sleeve of me with all these clouds, it looked more like Cloud 9, really.
Speaking of now and then, I mean, now, as you say, is now for the moment, future, who knows, but you've definitely got a then in the past. Looking at the music industry now that you're in it as a solo performer as opposed to a staff performer, how different is it for you personally?
Well, it's totally different, really. In those days, it was the 4 of us. We just went in studios, made records, went out on tour, then went back in the studio, made records, and that was it, really. Nowadays, it's a big business, and it has to be coordinated. The Beatles, after around 1964 at least, we just had to put records out, and people rushed out to buy them. It's not sort of like that these days. You have to work with the record label and coordinate releases and do whatever promotion you can. And also, I'm on my own, really, whereas in the past I would have had 3 other smart asses all cracking jokes with me.
Do you miss the then? I mean, do you miss...
I miss that side of having, we used to have fun at press conferences. They used to be really funny because, there'd always be somebody with a wisecrack. But I miss that side of the Fab Four.
George, do you find that people treat you as some sort of religious icon these days?
No, not really. I think people seem to give me some respect, which is quite nice.
You have great hair.
Yeah.
Do you have any reservations about making another album and getting back into the sort of sweepstakes of the music business?
No.
I think the last few years, the last couple of albums, you now have some reservations about that.
Yeah, I got a bit tired of it back in around about 1980. I just felt there was no point, really. From what I could see, the way the music was that was out there, I couldn't relate to it. And I just thought, well, I've got a lot of other things to do. I might as well have a rest. But getting back into it, I didn't really feel like, I didn't really consider what's going to happen. I'm going to be out there with this record and they may not buy it or whatever. I didn't think about that. I don't think, so if you have a flop, it's a flop. I think you have to just make something that you enjoy yourself and see what happens. And I've had enough success in my life that if I have failure, it's okay too.
George, you talked about not having 3 friends beside you and to joke with and maybe be a bit more support.
Yeah.
What is more difficult, or what was more difficult, being a Beatle or an ex-Beatle?
I think being one was much more difficult. I mean, it was fun for a long time, but there was so much pressure on us, you know? It became really tiresome, and it was good in a way to dissipate that energy that there was with the four of us together. You know, let it go away so that we could have some semblance of a life. Otherwise, it would have just been madness, you know, continually.
George, how much of an influence was Jeff Lynne as far as getting you to go and do this album? Was it mostly your idea, or did Jeff Lynne come to you and say, I've got a great idea for an album?
No, it's my idea to get him. I thought about the producers that I'm familiar with, which aren't many. I thought, you know, I need to have somebody who I would respect and who also had some respect for my past and wouldn't try and make me into something I wasn't. Then I thought of Jeff, and then it was a matter of getting to know him. And from then on, we worked really, most of the songs were mine, but we wrote 3 songs together on the album. And we just worked very well as a team, you know. He had a lot of ideas, which he bounced off of me, or vice versa. It was good, but during that, I just thought, some of the songs, especially some of the ones we wrote together, I kept saying, well, you should sing this bit, but then say, no, it's your album, you have to do it. So I'd like in the future to work with Jeff to make an album which is not him or me, you know, it's us. That way, you know, I think it'll be more interesting.
What about the music today? You said earlier that in the early 80s you couldn't relate to it and you just said, heck of it, I'm going to take a rest. Has something changed? Has your attitude towards the music changed, or how did you feel the music changed?
Yeah, I think the main reason for the problem happened because of the recession, you know. That's what happened. It went through all kinds of businesses, through radio and the music industry, and the people didn't seem to know what was happening. They were confused about what was supposed to be good and what was... I think they all lost direction, and I just didn't want to be a part of that. But I think it sorted itself out a bit. I certainly sorted myself. Maybe that's the only change, is that I've changed. And I just felt it'd be fun to do an album, see what happens.
Do you hear anything today that you like? Any artists that capture your imagination?
Bob Dylan?
George?
I do. I mean, unfortunately, not so much in pop music or top 40, but my favorite music at the moment is this Bulgarian choir. It's called The Mysterious Voices of Bulgaria, and it's the most brilliant vocals. It's quite beautiful.
What's your reaction to people doing bad covers of Beatles songs?
Doesn't bother me. I don't hear them anyway.
In 1977, you produced Monty Python's thing called the Lumberjack song, and it was George O'Donnell and Begin Harrison producing. First of all, were you disappointed that it flopped? And second of all, Monty Python had quite, I guess it allowed you in a way to start animated films. I was wondering if you could kind of explain about that.
They had a lot of...
They helped you in a way to start animated films.
Yeah, that's...
If I remember correctly, it was your original investment in the life of Brian.
That's right, yeah. Well, I've always been a big fan of the Pythons, and they asked me to do the Lumberjack song. They'd actually recorded it once,
Yeah.
but I think what happened was that Michael Palin sang it, but during the time they recorded it, he had laryngitis, so Eric Idle sang it. That was on the Drury Lane recording. And they wanted to redo it, so they asked me just to do it. So we did it with Michael singing.
How did you get them to hold their breath for so long?
It's good, isn't it? They have these other people who sing along with them, the Mike Tompkins Singers or something like that. So it's sort of a Goon Show joke. You know, the whole end of that with the running up and down the corridor, that was from the Goon Show.
And how did that develop in the animated film?
Oh, well, I've just been friendly with them for a long time, and they were in pre-production of The Life of Brian with Lou Grade, some sort of, I think it's ATV or something like that in England, EMI Films, and they backed out of it as they were right into pre-production. A friend of mine had asked if there was any way I could think of to help them. I asked my business manager, and he thought about it for a few days, and then he came back and he said, yeah, okay, we'll be the producers. And so we borrowed the money from the bank and formed Handmade Films and made made it, really. I did it because I wanted to see the film. I couldn't stand the idea of it never being made.
Is Handmade Films currently working on a project?
Lots of films, yeah.
Are there any to talk about?
Yeah, I can mention, apart from the films that are out currently, which is The Withnail and I, and a film called Judith Hearn with Maggie Smith and Bob Hoskins. We've got a Bob Hoskins film that he directed. We let him be a director, so the Kamikaze Film Company, which is called The Raggedy Rawnie. It's about some gypsies in Eastern Europe. So that's finished now. It's not out yet. There's another film by Nick Rogue called Track 29, written by Dennis Potter. I don't know if that name means anything in Canada, but he's a very good scriptwriter, playwright. And that's finished. We have another film in the making now in Los Angeles, which is called Checking Out. That's by a guy called David Leland, who just had a successful film called Wish You Were Here. And there's another film starting up by the same writer and director, Bruce Robinson, same person who did Withnail and I. It's called How to Get Ahead in Advertising.
It must be quite a balancing act.
And we've got a great screenplay that we're just trying to cast right now, which is the old Kurt Vonnegut book, Breakfast of Champions, but that's a really nice screenplay.
Could you tell me what a typical day in the life of George Harrison would be?
It's different all the time, but depends really what I'm doing. Like last week I've been just getting up, go for a run around my garden, eat a bowl of Scott's porridge oats and go in the recording studio and something like that. Go and have dinner, finish off what I was doing, go to bed, that kind of thing. Or get up, go to London, go in the office. Varied things, you know. There is no typical day really. Get on the Concorde, fly to New York.
Paul McCartney is working with Elvis Costello right now. When I heard that news, I was very surprised. But then after I thought about it, I thought, what a combination. Here we have the intelligence of a Costello with the great pop songwriting stylings of McCartney. Do you think that Paul was thinking he was in a bit of a rut and he looked for somebody who was, I dare to say it, but he's similar to John Lennon?
I wouldn't say Elvis Costello is like John Lennon personally. I don't think he is. Don't think he comes close anywhere near John. I mean, I think Elvis Costello is pretty good.
I just mean he's a very thoughtful man.
He wears glasses. It's about the closest. But yeah, I think Paul definitely was in a rut, in a ruttle. And yeah, I think it's good that he should work with various people, and hopefully he'll find somebody who will actually tell him something, you know, because most people work with Paul and they're afraid to just say anything to him. And I think that's no good. You need to have somebody you can work with who will tell you you know good when you know good. Otherwise, it's no help at all. So I look forward to hearing what it is. It may be good, I don't know.
That brings us to the inevitable question. I read something a couple of weeks ago where you said, yeah, there's a possibility that you, Paul, and Ringo might do some work together.
Yeah, well, Paul had asked, you know, and had suggested maybe the chance of me and he writing together something. And, I mean, it's pretty funny, really, because, I mean, I've only been there about 30 years in Paul's life, and it's like now he wants to write with me. But I think it's maybe quite interesting sometime to do that.
Would you tell him his number?
Well, you know, sure, now I for the last few years I've said my mind to him, you know, just whenever I felt something like, you know, thing like Broad Street I thought was a big mistake. Not to make the film, because I quite enjoyed it myself, but the idea of trying to write and do everything yourself, that's the mistake.
What barriers are still between you and Paul, even putting it together? You seem to, like, it seems to be that Paul would have to kind of make a move to kind of maybe catch up a couple of things that maybe outstanding between the two of you.
I think the only barrier between us really is our astrological signs. You know, we just, you know, some of the time we get on pretty well, and the rest of the time I find I don't have anything in common with him, really.
Does that surprise you?
Pardon?
Does that surprise you after all those many years together?
Well, I think, you know, with anybody, if you have a relationship with somebody else, you have to be, you know, you have to be able to trust each other. And to do that, you have to be able to talk to each other straight. And no, I think there's the thing with Paul, one minute he says one thing and he's really charming, and the next minute, you know, he's all uptight. And we all go through that, you know, good and bad and stuff, but I think by now we've got to find like somewhere in the center. Anyway, he's getting better. I think after Broad Street it humbled him a bit. And, you know, he's going to be okay.
Pop's so-called newfound social conscience.
I haven't heard it yet.
The live video, the post-live video.
Oh, yeah, well, that's good. I like anything like that. I think sometimes I feel it's a shame that it's down to musicians who seem to be going around saving, you know, the world. I think some of the politicians should get their fingers out occasionally. But it's very good. It's a great example to, you know, to the populations of the various countries, particularly what Bob Geldof did.
Do you think that music, you know, when it comes to writing a song, that a song should and can have any kind of influence on people?
Yeah, I think songs have had influence on people, and there's no reason why not. I think like films or plays or books, governments, you know, a song's just as good a vehicle to have influence on people.
Can you tell us about your son Ben? He's 9 or 10 now, and
Yeah.
Is he a budding musician, or what do you think he's going to do?
Yeah, he's 9.5, and he's got a pretty good ear for music. He enjoys all kinds of music, from Mozart to Ravi Shankar and to Little Richard and Chuck Berry. So he's good. He's playing the piano a little bit, and I think he's going to be okay. I'm not saying that that's what he's going to be in his life. I mean, he's obviously got a good musical ability at this
Does he
age.
understand that his father was a Beatles? Does he understand that era?
Now he does. Now, yeah. He sees, you know, you can't turn the television on without it still having something to do with Beatles, you know. And all the kids, as I was just saying to somebody earlier, all the kids pick up on the Beatles through Yellow Submarine. See, I made a point of not saying anything about them. But by the time he was 5, you know, he wanted to know how the piano part to Bulldog went, which completely threw me, because I didn't understand where he'd heard a song like that, because I hadn't heard that myself, really. And I realized it was in Yellow Submarine.
George, I've read where you get out with Elton and Eric and the cricket matches. You show up at Formula One races from time to time and do get out. But I also read where you have said in interviews that you're anywhere from leery to absolutely terrified at times to be out in public. If you did go on tour, how much of a consideration are your feelings about being out in public?
No, I'm not.
Any ground
Yeah.
rules you would set up?
I'm not really worried about being in public. I'm not crazy about being in crowds. This is even just walking in an airport or being in a football match or something. You know, this is when nothing to do with people looking for me or threatening me. I just don't like crowds. I don't like traffic jams. I don't like that situation. I prefer peace and quiet. But I don't really worry about anything like that. The only time is if you get a mob of people who know you're going to be somewhere, and the particular fanatics. There's always fanatics, you know, at rock and roll concerts, but to do a tour wouldn't be any trouble, because you have all the security, you know, the way in and the way out. You know, it's no bother, really. I don't fear for my life like some people try to suggest. You know, they said since John Lennon got killed, I go and hide, and I've got a big fence around my property. I had the fence around my property back in 1965, you know. So there's no change, really.
So you don't travel with bodyguards or anything?
No. Absolutely on my own. I don't even have a roadie.
Did you have a bit of an incident on the way over on the
Oh, I tried to get here yesterday and the plane took off and one of the engines failed. So they had to shut it down, and then we sort of went for a ride over the North Sea and dumped the fuel and came back. That was after it being delayed about 3 or 4 hours. So I just went home again and came on the Concorde this morning.
When you were with some friends and you get together at a jam session in your studio at home, do you do Beatles tunes and do you remember all the words?
No, don't know any of the words. Occasionally I can remember one or two, but we don't do Beatle tunes. More likely to do Everly Brother tunes or Chuck Berry tunes.
Because you've got the other interests, like with handmade films, and you've proven yourself to be an astute businessman away from the actual music business, do you feel that's rounded out your life a lot more, that, you know, at this point in your career you feel complacent and you feel satisfied with what you
I think the film company and the various things you talk about, I think they impress everybody else more. So their concept of me is now more rounded out. Now they all think, oh, you know, he's more smart than we thought. But it doesn't impress me.
I'd just like to know about your, I don't want to get too deep into it because it's pretty personal, but about your religious thoughts these days. Are you still promoting it or do you keep it to yourself?
Well, I keep it to myself unless somebody asks me about it, but I still feel the same as I felt back in the 60s. Well, I lost touch with the Krishnas when the Prabhupada, you know, the Swami died about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, so I don't really know. I know one or two of them, but I don't really hang out with them. I used to go and see the old master, you know, the A.C. Bhaktivedanta, quite a lot. He was real good. But yeah, I'm still involved, but it's something which is more like a thing that you do inside yourself. You don't actually do it in the road, you know? It's a way of just trying to get in touch with yourself.
You used to sing about it in your music, but...
Yeah, I still write songs with it in there, you know, bits and pieces, but I got lots of songs you know, unfinished that say various things, but maybe I say them in different ways now. There's a song on this album which is straight out of Yogananda, Fish on the Sand, it's called.
When you say that people today might suggest that, well, he's more talented than we gave credit for, as you diverse, perhaps does that mean that you think maybe you were underused a little bit during the Beatle era? As a member of the group, the talents?
Yeah, possibly, but the Beatle producer George Martin said recently how he always felt sorry that because he concentrated more on them, and he should have paid more attention to me. And he said to me personally, I hope you'll forgive me. But, you know, I think I'm quite happy with my role in the Beatles. You know, it split up because of all those problems, because there was too many songs and because we got, you know, too close to each other. But I'm quite happy with the way things went. But I feel that whatever I am, I always have been that. You know, maybe different things have taken longer to, you know, reach the surface or whatever. But, you know, I am what I am, and I'm not really that much different to how I was then. Maybe I'm more able to express it, or maybe people are more interested now in what I had to say, because in the 60s and early 70s, they thought I was a loony, because I just, you know, went to India and did all that bit.
As you approach mid-40s or mid-40s, what's your idea of a wild time these days?
2 bottles of Dos Equis.
George, I want to know what the circumstances were on the song That's What It Takes. I thought that was such a brilliant song.
And it took us a long time to make it into the song, you know, the middle 8. And then it still felt like it needed another bit. But as the song by that, it got quite good, then Jeff didn't mind using this other little hook, which he'd already written, which is the That's What It Takes part. So that's the story.
George, you seem to be such a modest person. I wonder, having been right at the top, either if you were modest then, as you say you are what you were,
No, I think it's a lot to do with, I'm not a fanatical person about astrology or anything. I don't want you to get me wrong, but I'm a Pisces, and Pisces are sort of like that, One half's going where the other half's just been, and, tend to be more withdrawn or whatever. If you look up Pisces, they're the ones who are the spiritual ones who get pushed around by Geminis.
George, have you ever been able to work out all the legal problems that existed after the Beatles?
Sort of,
And
yeah. Virtually everything is slowly going away. There's one final thing which is due to be settled any moment now, which is with the old EMI Capitol Records. And it's about time to...
do any of you hold a grudge against one another over any of those problems, or was that...
I don't. I think Paul does because he didn't show up at the Hall of Fame. But I don't. I think, it's taken time. It's been, I just forgot about it. Actually, it's been so long. But most of the things are all solved now. And
George, it was over 20 years ago when you first got started in the music business. You're still there. What about when you're 64?
who knows? If Little Richard and Chuck Berry are still doing it, then there's no reason why we can't.
You said in the TV special that was 20 years ago today that all you need is love. And then you amended that slightly for the Rolling Stone anniversary special. How do you feel now?
What did I say on the Rolling Stone?
I was trying to remember. You said yes, but in the Rolling Stone special.
No, somebody said, well, you've got to feed yourself. There are, if you look at it it depends on which way you're looking at it, because obviously people need somewhere to live, and they need food and all that. But the thing is, what I'm talking about, love, absolute love, when we have that, we're really plugged into God, and God provides, and always has provided us with not just enough, but abundance. See, this is the joke, that we are really like beggars in a gold mine. If you get to understand the nature of God, then you know there's more than enough for everybody. So that's the kind of love I'm talking about, where that would automatically take care of your food and your home and your clothes and stuff like that.
We're afraid we're running a little late. Can I have one more question? George, the biography that Peter Brown did on the Beatles, the Legend, we read it, and it's basically accurate. Peter Brown at the time was correct.
Is it a bit inaccurate, did you say?
Accurate.
Is it? I thought it was just a sort of spiteful, sort of bitchy book.
Yeah.
There might have been parts of it accurate. I didn't actually read. I read a few bits about it, and just the style it was written, I thought, I don't need this, to get this in my brain. I've got enough to think about. But it was very spiteful and nasty.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you. Okay, it's a quick one.
She's also not in place today.
Yeah. What's the name?
S-T-E-P-H-A-N-I. Really got to tear.
George, if we wanted to get a screenplay to handmade films, what would they do?
Thanks, Treasurer.
If we wanted to get a screenplay to handmade films, what would they do?
What would they do?
Yeah, well, how would
Well,
they go
they'd,
about it?
get to it in amongst the whole hundreds that's been sent, and eventually somebody would read it if they thought it was